Hey there, friends and enemies. JoPaWrites here once again, and welcome back to the Writer's Thoughts. This is my podcast on all things gaming, streaming, geeky, etc. that I find interesting, my thoughts, my opinions on them. And yeah, this is going to be kind of a 2020 year in review slash looking back at the positives that we've had in a very tough 2020. I know it's not gone as planned for most people. There's been a lot of problems with COVID-19, with all sorts of other issues. It seemed like one thing after another. But this is the time for me to look back at the positives, the things that I enjoyed from 2020, and what we can take from it and hopefully take into 2021 and start that off on the right foot. Now, I'm very excited about this episode because I know a lot of this is stuff I've kind of touched on in the past, whether you've seen it on my YouTube or on my Twitch streams. So if you want to see me talk about these kinds of subjects on the regular, you want to ask me questions, you want to interact with me, hit me up on my Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, whatever platform you might find yourself on. I'm on all of them as JoPaWrites, but I'm going to jump into it and first touch it. The list of amazing games that we got released in 2020 is kind of mind-blowing, especially when you consider all of the potential issues that we had with games being released while developers are working from home and quarantining because of COVID and everything. It's actually pretty incredible that we saw the release of some of these pretty fantastic games. I'm not going to touch on every single game. I just want to touch on games that I really enjoyed, games that I think are better than they might get credit for, or games that I thought are released in 2020 and really have a chance to break through and hit 2021 in a big way. So I wanted to touch on games not only that I've personally played a ton, but that I've watched a ton. And so it's not going to be just games that I've just spent hours and hours playing myself. So first and foremost, I want to say Warzone as a BR was game-changing for me. It's my favorite battle royale by far. I did play a lot of Apex Legends going before that. Played a little bit of Fortnite, although I'm not a good builder in that game, so that doesn't help me out quite a bit. But yeah, this was the COD BR that we've wanted for some time. Blackout just didn't hit the same notes. It was too slow, honestly, for a lot of people, especially for casual players when it comes to finding all the specific attachments for the various guns. And some people liked it. It was a little bit more in depth, but overall, for casual play, for the wide range of the player base, this was the COD Battle Royale everyone has been waiting for. It's been a huge hit. So much so that not only did they launch it in 2020, they did the first crossover of Call of Duty games in history of the franchise, which is dated back well over 10 years. It's actually crazy to think that now in Warzone we have not only Modern Warfare guns, not only Modern Warfare operators and attachments and everything, but now we have Black Ops Cold War weapons, attachments, operators, skins, etc. So that's kind of crazy. It's definitely a first, and it's something that I think is a game changer going forward for Call of Duty, whether they stick with Warzone forever going forward, whether they release a new BR or a new type of mode in a couple years that'll kind of replace Warzone or at least go alongside of it. Either way, it's very interesting to see where that goes from here. And it's amazing to think that the game has been out for seemingly forever. It feels like the game has been out for a really, really long time. And it launched in 2020. That's how long this year has felt, which is kind of insane. But I think not everyone's going to love Battle Royales. Not everyone's going to love COD games. But for me personally, this is a great Battle Royale. And it's something coming from somebody who doesn't play COD every single year. I've dipped my toes in it from time to time. I might snag Cold War for zombies, but I'm not a diehard COD player, and this game feels so good. So I think that's very interesting. I wanted to touch on that game because it's not one that's mentioned oftentimes in your game of the year categories, it's not one that folks talk about when it comes to, oh, this is the best game of 2020, but it's an absolute game changer, in my opinion. And I don't think it gets enough credit for being that. There's a couple more that I wanted to really touch on as far as games that I think are going to have long lasting impacts well beyond the single player games that'll get recognition as game of the year as well. And then one of those is Valorant. We've seen recently with some tournaments that they've had, Valorant seems to be the next generation CSGO for competitive PC games. And I think, if anything, it's more palatable to watch for the casual player. It's easier to understand. You get the heroes, you get their abilities. It's not going to be perfect when it comes to balance, but it's actually more balanced than I think some folks give it credit for. Games like Overwatch, games that are hero shooters, are very, very tough to balance. And Valorant gets that done very well, and they have to because of the emphasis that Riot is putting on competitive play. There are very few other games that are investing as heavily in the competitive scene, that are having so many high placed, very important tournaments, and that are absolutely focusing on that competitive aspect. That means that not everyone is going to be able to play it, but at the highest end, it's played at such a different level that it'll be very interesting to see where it goes from here. I think I'm very excited to see where the future lies with this game, as long as Riot continues to invest heavily in the game and they find a way to keep it fresh to watch for folks who don't play the game and don't pay attention to it all the time. Keeping players and viewers up to date on the game is going to be absolutely important, and I don't know how they do that exactly, but that's the one place where I hope they really kind of focus on going forward, and I think they're doing a very good job. And that's one that, again, I think that's the type of game that can last a long time in the competitive scene. We've also got another game that I think is going to have a long-lasting impact on gaming in general, and that's Genshin Impact. Now, if you don't know, it's a free-to-play kind of anime waifu style RPG, but it's got co-op, it's got gacha pulls, which has strictly always been a mobile thing previously, and this is the first time we're seeing it on console. Now, because of that, obviously the game is going to have pay-to-win tendencies. That's a bit problematic. However, the game produced a ton of content that you can access for free. You can play it as a battle royale slash free-to-play game and still come out with a great party. You'll get your 5-star characters. You'll get your awesome weapons and all that kind of stuff if you grind it out. And it's just so much fun. I think the biggest issue is holding the game back, honestly, besides the gacha system, because I think that's because it's kind of a mobile game that's been converted to PC and console, is getting better endgame and better co-op abilities. If you can get co-op to be more seamless in this game, I feel like it has unlimited potential. They've been churning out content for the game. It's an absolute blast to play. I think it's underrated with regards to its story and some of the other things it has. Its voice acting is very good and so much fun. And it's just a nice, chill game. It's not going to be super high-end as far as the end game. There's no real dungeons or raids or anything like that in the game yet. So that's something I think that's holding it back a bit. But overall, it's a fantastic game. You just have to go in with the right mindset and understand that if you don't want to be a whale, you don't want to spend all of the money on the gacha pulls, you don't have to. And you can still have a great, great team. I have advocated this before, but I think I've only spent $25 total on the game, and that's to back up how much fun I've had. I think 4 or 5 level 80 characters. I have all kinds of other leveled up characters as well. So it's definitely doable. You don't have to spend money. I only spent some on the battle pass, 2 battle passes, and then one of this blessing that allows you to get primo gems. And right now is the best time to get into it. So that's another game I feel like is going to impact the market. They've made so much money between their mobile, PC, and console crossover that I feel like more games are going to go that route and hopefully not be as aggressive with their gacha pulls and not so aggressive with their monetization. Because that's, again, between that and not being able to farm quite enough all the time, those are the things that are holding the game back just a little bit. But again, this one doesn't get mentioned in Game of the Year, and I think it's fantastic. You got other smaller games that I think are going to be impactful going forward, like Spellbreak, and the way they've changed the Battle Pass feature to be a storytelling chapter focused is very interesting, although that's more of a niche game. Then you've got Rogue Company, which I think is the first kind of hero arena shooter, but it's third person, so it's a little bit different. That's on console and PC. I feel like that's another game that's very interesting, and I would like to see where that one goes going forward. But there's a lot of these that are kind of filling in these different genres and things that we haven't seen before, and that's what I'm most excited about, because single player games can experiment and do different things, but it's really where the multiplayer games come out and broaden what you typically would expect from a co-op or multiplayer game. Those excite me the most because that's where I love to live. That's where the games I like to play. That's the games that I want to be in with friends. I want to make content on, all that kind of good stuff. So that might just be a personal preference, but that's really what I love from those types of games. And that's why I won't give up on a game like The Avengers, which I really still enjoy. I know I have friends who still enjoy it. I know it gets panned for not being the best game, and it did have its issues. But just like games like Destiny, which I'm a huge fan of, games like Warframe, the difference between Avengers and Warframe is that Avengers obviously was a $60 title instead of free to play. It also had so much more expectations that if it had come a little bit more under the radar and been allowed to build over the course of time, months, whatever, add characters, add different types of, there's a raid that's coming in early next year, there's different things like that. If it had been given that time to just grow as a ongoing game over time, I think it'll end up being a pretty solid one. But we've seen in the past that it's hard to trust these ongoing games like Fallout 76, like Anthem, because you just never know when the updates are going to hit, when the good content is going to be coming, all of that kind of good stuff. Even Destiny has its ups and downs with regards to the consistency of content, worthwhile content, all that kind of stuff. These games are not easy, but I feel like more of them are good after so long, after 6 months, a year, or whatever, that maybe it's best to hold off and not really dive into them. But when you do, they're going to be a lot of fun, especially when you play with friends. That's where Avengers sits for me. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed leveling my characters. I did guides and builds on some of the different characters. I really enjoyed that. The combat feels amazing. It's just got some endgame improvements, some loot improvements that it needs to make, and some variety of enemies and missions. And once it does that, I think that it'll be in good shape. So that's one I would look out for in 2021, 100%. And I wouldn't be surprised if it does make a bit of a comeback. Then we've got single player games, man. There were so many amazing single player games. You've got Last of Us 2, you've got Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy Remake, you've got Hades, you've got all of these fantastic games. And it was almost impossible to keep up with all of them. You had others, like you have your perennial Assassin's Creed game. You've got Watch Dogs Legion. You got all of these. There's so many. And I feel like, especially for a year that was juggling the PS4 and Xbox One and then the PS5 and Series X launches, we just got so many late in the cycle fantastic games that I'm actually surprised that this many came out. Games like Hades came out that are more indie focused and are fantastic. And then you saw the rise of games like I'm trying to think. Among Us, sorry. That game came out of nowhere and blew up. You've got Fall Guys, which absolutely blew up thanks to their Twitter. It kind of faded a bit, but it's been such an interesting year. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the pandemic. Like, obviously, the COVID-19 problem set a lot of people back, but it also allowed for some things within gaming and with your viewing of YouTube or streaming that I wonder if folks are taking for granted, especially as we head into folks getting the vaccine and being able to go out and go about their regular business. So that's the kind of next thing I wanted to touch on pretty heavily is that we have seen a dramatic shift in the way people consume content. Obviously, we've been looking at cord cutters for so long that it's only to be expected that this is going to evolve from cutting cord from cable and now going to Netflix. But now you've got to pay for not only Netflix, but you've got Disney Plus, you've got Hulu, you've got so many different streaming services, HBO Max. There's just too many out there. So of course, folks are now going to lean into Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, all of these free viewing experiences. And I think that's why we've seen the rise. The numbers are absolutely off the charts. The numbers are for streaming services, for videos watched of gaming content, of just content in general has blown up this year because people are home. They're consuming so much content and there's so much to pay for with regards to those streaming services that this option has become that much more available. And the more folks watch it, the more it's in the mainstream, the more attention is brought upon it. We saw it a couple years back with the rise of Ninja playing with mainstream celebrities like Drake. And now this year, it's a common thing to see athletes being on Twitch. You saw Logic left his rap career just to go stream on Twitch. You've got T-Pain who's on there heavily. Just amazing things like that that we would have never seen in the past. But now, because these services, these free viewing experiences have blown up so much, they're in the common mindset. They're not just niche viewing experience. They're not just for folks who are gamers and geeks like us who all they do is watch other gamers. All they watch is Tim the Tatman playing Warzone for hours. There's so much variety out there. There's so much entertainment out there for free. It's amazing. Like, it is so impressive to see everyone churning out all this fantastic content. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see these streaming companies take a little bit of a hit because of this. Now, long term, those companies are going to be fine. You, as long as you're putting out shows like The Witcher, like The Mandalorian, like all these other fantastic shows that are almost much must watch, they're going to be fine. HBO Max, with them releasing their movies next year on HBO Max as well as in theaters, those are reasons to keep folks tuned into those streaming services. You've got Disney Plus has a slate of Star Wars, Marvel stuff that's going to be released consistently for 2021. And that's absolutely going to be necessary, but it's also costly. If they don't improve their bottom line, these free streaming and YouTube services are going to surpass them over time as far as taking the viewers who are just tired of paying near cable prices for all these different streaming services. That's just one thing to keep in mind. The other impacts that we've seen with COVID is you have more people who are available to who are watching, but you also have a lot more streamers, a lot more content creators, a lot more creative people taking those risks that you might not have been able to otherwise because you're home, you're working from home, you have access to your entire setup, you're able to do a lot more. You're not having to drive an hour to and from work, no commuting, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that it's going to be interesting how this changes the way we do business going forward. Are more companies, developers, going to be working from home more consistently? Are more people going to be able to work from home as well and consume and create content at a higher rate? It's very interesting to me because I really enjoy that aspect and seeing where the numbers are trending and how high they can actually go. Because we don't know if we've just tipped the iceberg as far as content watching and content creation, or if it's something that we're going to see level off here in the near future. Because that's entirely possible. There's only a limited number uh, of people that can consume content at any one time. Those numbers are extremely high, but unless they are only watching certain platforms, who knows where they're going to end up in the long run. So I don't know. I really like thinking about where this could all go, what's going to happen in 2021 as now we've moved past the coronavirus, hopefully, and return to some form of normalcy. Because for me personally, things that I do miss in general are going to conventions. Conventions are the absolute best. If you have not been to one, I highly recommend checking one out. I go to Guardian Con, aka GCX, every year. It is an absolute blast. I love it. I can play different games. I can meet new friends, meet streamers, meet viewers, everything in between. It is an amazing experience. I've been to PAX East twice. They are a gamer's dream. There's so many indie games I would have never heard about, companies that are absolutely amazing with people that are really cool and developing these awesome games that you just don't see if you're only paying attention to top releases for the next couple months, your AAA games and everything. Those games are there as well, and they're super fun to try out early. But I miss conventions more than I can possibly tell everybody. I made so many friends. I was on a panel at PAX East. I've met Dr. Lupo and folks like that. And just some of the people, I've made lifelong friends from being at some of these conventions. And I think it's something that is what I miss the most about the coronavirus. I'm not somebody who goes out traditionally and will go and hang out with a bunch of friends every day. But getting together with a big group, getting to meet new folks, doing that on occasion is kind of perfect for me. I also went to local like streamer meetups, like Twitch streamers or YouTube creators, etc. Those were a lot of fun as well, and I really, really miss those. Also, the Comic Cons. There's so many events that you can go to. Once we are safe, I'm gonna still be wearing a mask as I go to these events personally, but I cannot wait for them to return safely, and I hope they do as soon as possible because I do miss them quite a bit, and I definitely recommend folks check it out if at all possible. And the next thing I wanted to touch on is the rise of TikTok, especially when it comes to content creation and the best way to utilize all of the different platforms to the best of your ability. And this is something that I've been paying attention a lot to recently, seeing creators who have risen through the ranks and been successful by using one platform or another to really blow up. And TikTok has been, in my opinion, the easiest platform for you to grow from 0 to 100 as quickly as possible. It is the most discoverable platform you will ever see. You will 100% get more eyeballs on your content if you put a little bit of effort and creativity into your creations. And I think it's a platform that a lot of folks, especially those like me who are a little bit older, for the gamers who are not in the demographic of teenage, young adult, and are looking at it, oh, that's the app that folks are just dancing and twerking on. And that is far from the case. And if you were to take the leap and dive onto TikTok and find your niche on there, your niche, it will be well worth your time and effort. It's something that I have taken a little bit of a break from doing personally because I want to put out better content and not just put out easy to throw up posts and stuff. So that's something that I am redoing, and with the beginning of the next year, I've already assembled like clips. I've editing them. I'm getting the music down. All that kind of good stuff is what I'm working on going into 2021 because I feel like looking at the platform, it is the best platform to grow your, not only your TikTok following, but it translates very well relatively compared to your Twitch following, your YouTube following, etc. Using these other platforms is so huge. I've also seen folks use Twitter very well. Twitter does well for motivational or inspirational videos, for videos that are kind of easy to gain popular opinion with. It's their algorithm is a little bit different, and the Twitter problem that you'll often see is you have to have something, a idea that's almost been rehashed a little bit. It's not as much original content compared to what you might see on other platforms. Instagram is great for like their Instagram Reels are not anywhere near TikTok's discoverability at this point, although it's kind of getting better. Instagram is really good if you're photogenic or if you pick a lane and really stick to it with regards to your pets, your food, anything like that. Instagram works really well if you stay in a certain box. That's the difference between TikTok and other platforms. YouTube as well. You're going to flow in the algorithm better if you stick to one specific game. That's not always enjoyable for people, but traditionally that is what is going to help you grow the most. TikTok, you can put a little bit of variety on and still hit crazy growth just because of the way videos end up becoming popular and then hitting the becoming viral, all that kind of good stuff. It's just mind-blowing to watch the variety you can really post it. Now, some people will stick to one lane when it comes to TikTok, and that's understandable. Some people who do skits will have like characters that they use in their skits. Whatever the case may be, it's far easier to grow that on TikTok than it is any other platform at this current time. And so the rise of TikTok in 2020 has been very interesting. I think a lot of people have been waiting for the next Vine for folks to blow up using, and TikTok has been that and more. Now we're seeing other platforms. You've got Twitter using fleets and stuff that basically their version of stories that are not going to really find you a new audience, but they might help you connect to your current audience a little bit better. Nothing compares to TikTok when it comes to that growth, and that's something that has been very fun to watch as somebody who initially resisted the urge to look into TikTok and use it myself because it seemed like it was for young people, like only for young people. But the more you get on there, the more that it tailors your For You page to your desires, what you're looking for, the more you realize how varied TikTok is, how much easier it is to connect with other people in a certain category. For example, I started watching a couple Naruto videos, and now I am fully invested apparently in Naruto TikTok, and it is wild. It's a whole genre that's there, and that is booming. People doing characters, they're doing cosplay, they're doing just their favorite scenes, etc., and it blows up. It does very well. That might not translate to your content, but it's just interesting to see all those little pockets. YouTube is somewhat similar. The difference is YouTube is harder to have the video blow up unless you've already got a following base. Like I have a friend who hit 100,000 views on a video, and his average views before that was under 1,000. So you don't need that following to. I mean, that's gonna happen more often on TikTok than any other platform. So I know this has been kind of me going on and on about the benefits of TikTok and stuff. In general, I would tell folks who are creating content, variety is the spice of life. It's kind of corny to say, corny to hear, but if you're not doing, if you're doing only Twitch, growth is going to be harder. Not to say impossible, it's going to be harder than if you do multiple platforms. Even if that means you stream a little bit less and you take that time and you edit videos for YouTube, you edit content for TikTok, you post consistent pictures on Instagram, you are interacting on Twitter. That's where you're going to see your best growth on Twitter, is not only talking to the void and putting your thoughts out there, but also responding to folks. That's where the interaction of Twitter works out the best for most folks. So that's just a little bit of a sidetrack on my thoughts on content creation and variety and that kind of stuff. So moving on, I wanted to kind of look forward a little bit to 2021. There are games that are coming out that I'm fairly excited about, but also I think 2021 is a kind of a restart for a lot of people after being home so long with COVID. And we're still probably going to be in lockdown for a bit, but it's a chance to refresh. And I've never been one who has stuck to or even tried to stick to New Year's resolutions. But this is a year I think everybody needs that fresh start, and just to understand, okay, 2021 is not going to be what 2020 is. We're not going to have, I mean, fingers crossed, the COVID issue. We've got murder hornets, all those kind of, every month there was something new that was crazy. And that's just kind of an anomaly. We're not going to see that again, in my opinion, unless something really crazy happens. But don't say I jinxed it, because I did not. Anyway, so in the beginning of the year alone, there's games like Outriders that are dropping. You've got a lot of games are dropping content more consistently now. You've got like Fortnite, Warzone, you've got Apex, you've got Destiny. All of these games are dropping regular content even through the pandemic and now into 2021. That, unlike most years where we see a lull from January to March, I think this year is going to be still a time to catch up on those games that you might have missed from 2020, especially those games I talked about earlier. But I think it's going to be time to really understand how great these ongoing games are and how much content they can actually provide for you, even without having to spend a consistent amount of money. And that's a really nice idea. Like, if I know I can spend $10 and that'll cover my battle pass the content for the next 3 months, I'm happy with that. That is actually a better proposition than dropping $60 on a new game like Cyberpunk, not knowing how it's going to turn out or if it's going to be any good. Now, these games are games that I really enjoy sticking with, but beginning next year with Outriders and some other options, I think is when we're really going to see the benefits of next-gen console come into play. Unfortunately, Cyberpunk is the example I would use, but there's other games that we've seen that have struggled because they stuck to last gen and next gen at the same time, and that's something that's very, very difficult for developers, because you want to be as ambitious as possible, but you almost have to create two different games in order to satisfy everybody and make them seem like the same game, if that makes sense. It sounds weird to say, but you have games that are going to look so much better on next gen and take advantage of those features, and leaving all that out on the current gen console is going to be such a problem for games until they really commit fully to next gen. And that's something that I'm very excited about. We've got more Horizon Zero Dawn happening next year. We've got, Gotham Knights, Hogwarts Legacy. There's just so much good stuff that I'm really, really looking forward to in 2021 that I am really looking forward to continuing on with the podcast, creating new content, all of that kind of good stuff, because it's been like I said, 2020 has been such a wild year that if we can return to some sense of normalcy in 2021, I feel like there's going to be a lot of breakthroughs with regards to so many people, their content, their gaming, all of that kind of good stuff. So I am super stoked about that. I'm going to go through real quick and touch on some other release dates that I know that are upcoming that folks might not be aware of, or you might not be really looking forward to, that I know I'm super stoked about, because I'm just a geek like that. I just get very excited. And this is, okay, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. Folks say you shouldn't get your hopes up for games because you're probably going to be let down. And that is something I will never, ever, ever, ever get behind. I'm an excitable person when it comes to things I really enjoy, whether it's video games, whether it's Marvel movies or superhero movies in general, whether it's TV shows based off of my favorite video game franchises. There are going to be times where those things do not pan out, they're not very good, and folks won't enjoy them. I am not super critical. I enjoy almost all of them in some way, shape, or form. I enjoy them for what they are. If they're a big budget action flick, I'm not expecting the deepest story. I want to see things go boom. I want to see them have cool action sequences and have moments that'll be like, oh crap, that was dope. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking forward to. And if the plot doesn't make a ton of sense, I'm not going to be too pressed about it. So that's just a little tangent, because I know a lot of people, they feel like folks shouldn't get excited about things they are excited about. And that will never make sense to me. Be excited, get happy. Maybe have your expectations in check. And this is coming from someone, again, who I like the Avengers game. I like Anthem for what it was. I don't think it was a $60 title. But again, I feel like eventually if they come good, if they do improve upon that, it'll be a good title. Cyberpunk, you couldn't have known about the bugs and whatnot. So if you want to be excited about games, get excited about games. Just understand they're not always going to be perfect. They might not always live up to expectations, but such is life. And I feel like a lot of people should keep that in mind and kind of not judge others who are getting excited or really looking forward to whatever dope thing is around the corner. This is why I like the old E3, where I would see so many trailers. I would get super stoked for it, even if the game is not coming out till 2024, and I'd still get hyped about it. So that's just my personality. That's how I'll always be, and I'll never change that. Some games that are coming out soon. Hitman 3. I know folks are really looking forward to that. That's a cross-gen title. I know it sounds like it could be really cool. A lot of games are coming into early access with like King Arthur, like Everspace 2, games that I think folks would really be excited about. But early access has always been hit or miss. You never know what you're going to get with those games, because sometimes they come out and you're like, wow, this is surprisingly polished for early access. For example, Rogue Company is like that. It's still in beta, I think, technically, and the polish is there. It just had matchmaking issues that really held it back at first, in my opinion, and some other things that were not there. Although gunplay wise, graphics wise, all that kind of stuff, it was still very, very good. So February, you got like Outriders, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Neo 2, Complete Edition is coming to PC and PS5. Let's see, Persona 5 Strikers. You got Bravely Default 2, which is I didn't even know that was coming out, which is interesting. The first one was pretty solid. Then you got March is a lot of Switch games. You got Monster Hunter Rise. Folks are super excited about. Balan Wonderworld, I think, is potentially a sleeper. It's coming to all the consoles, so I'm excited about that. Disco Elysium, the Final Cut, looked actually pretty good when I saw the trailer for that. Returnal on PS5. A lot of interesting games that I think you don't often see a ton in January and February of a year, because of there's so many games that rush to come out in the Christmas period, right before Black Friday, right before Christmas. And I think that's a mistake in the long run if the game is either not ready or is going to get lost in the shuffle. Titanfall 2 is a perfect example of a game just being completely lost because it was not Call of Duty or Battlefield. So you got a near Replicant is coming out. You got Hoods, Outlaws, and Legends. That one actually looks interesting. Deathloop coming out in May. So a lot of very interesting games that I'm super stoked about early next year. That I can't wait to see where they go, how polished they can be, especially with these games that have been worked on from home for so long. Some under the radar ones like Back 4 Blood just released like alpha, and they had some content creators playing that early on. Looks very interesting. New World, folks are super stoked about that game. And yeah, I mean, there's so much out there that in 2021 to look forward to that I'm just tipping the iceberg there with some of these things. And honestly, I can't wait to see what happens. I am an eternal optimist when it comes to games and movies and TV shows. And whether that makes me a sucker, who knows? You'll just have to find out later this year as I kind of talk about some of these topics. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Writer's Thoughts. Again, if you want to, make sure you're following me on all platforms at JoPaWrites. I will hopefully be having guests here shortly. I was going to have some already, but with the holidays, it was hard to fit everyone's schedule in. So going into 2021, expect guests, if not every episode, but pretty regularly. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you do, leave a rating. Let me know. Like, all that kind of good stuff, whatever platform you have found me on. But my name is JoPaWrites. I love you guys. And I'll catch you all later. Have a good one.